How many people already have all their decorations packed up? Done, locked away, all my OCD people. All right, I see you. How many of you will leave them up a while? They'll just come down when we think of it, right? Anybody ever left them up till March? Any part of them? Yeah, March. Like, no. How about February? Okay, I see a couple hands. All right, very good. I had a neighbor. Now they're celebrating their victory over leaving them up the longest. All right. I had a neighbor in Raleigh, where we moved from, who left their Christmas tree up till about June. And it was in the picture window, in the family room, in the front of the house. And so it was my favorite neighbor, actually. For months and months, we would drive by and see the Christmas tree up. And trying to be a good neighbor, I never actually was jerky enough to say, why is it that you actually leave your Christmas tree up all year? But I've got a hunch that some of us, that it's already done, it's packed away because we like things neat and orderly, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We want to move on into a new year. Others of us leave the decorations up until we feel like taking them down, or until the weather's good, or until it's convenient. I've got a hunch, though, that for those of us who leave them up, I wonder if in some way, shape, or form, we're just trying to hold on to Christmas just a little bit longer. Not the pace of Christmas, not the expenditures of Christmas, not the waistline, expanding properties of Christmas, but some of the beautiful truths that God speaks to us at Christmas. As a faith community, we've been gathering around this theme for the last month, an extravagant Christmas. And if you haven't been with us, what we've really done is talk about the dichotomy between the Christmas story in the Bible, which is so simple and so humble, and I would even use the word sparse. It's a couple giving birth to a baby somewhere where the animals live. There's no music, there's no decorations, there's no food, there's no party. And yet, the way we often choose to celebrate Christmas in our culture is big and over the top and loud and calorie-filled and a lot of fun. And to be honest, for a long time, the disparity between those two stories bothered me. Until a few years ago, I began to wonder if all of our attempts to go big at Christmas really were simply moments where we wanted to tap into what God actually did that first Christmas. Because in human terms, the Christmas story is very humble. But in spiritual terms, it's extravagant. And so for the last month, we've talked about some of the extravagances of the first Christmas. And today, we're going to wrap up as we prepare to step into a new year by looking back for just another minute. And we're going to look at some extravagant memories that God gives Mary and Joseph, and I believe us, to carry with us into a brand new year. Now, memory is a funny thing, isn't it? Like sometimes we're so sure we're going to remember something, and 10 minutes later we can't. And then other times we remember really random things for years. Now you may think you've just had a wonderful Christmas, and there's no way you're going to forget any part of it. But think for a minute, what did you get for Christmas 2 years ago? Do you remember? What did you give your significant other for Christmas 4 years ago? Last year, our daughter got a hamster. It was, time to give her a pet. And we were sitting here this Christmas thinking, now what did we give her last year? Last year, we gave her the hamster. She took a victory lap around the whole house, right? It was a beautiful moment. We all celebrated. This year, we couldn't actually remember what year that happened. Isn't it funny that some of the best moments of our lives, we can tend to forget, and some of the most powerful moments that we have with God, we're so sure we're going to hold on to. We're so sure they're never going to fade. Our faith is never going to waver. And yet, a week, a month, a year, a decade, and they just get kind of fuzzy. Now, I think God knows this about us. And so he provides, after Jesus is born, 3 very powerful memories for Mary and Joseph so that they can remember who he is and how he's been present with them. And so I want to take a few minutes and just kind of talk through those. One reminder that God sends Mary and Joseph and us is that he's present. It's good to remember that God is present, isn't it? It's good to remember that God is with us. Now, I don't know if you had any time off work or off school, students and teachers, but we did in my family, and one of the things we do if we have a good bit of time off is we catch up on the shows that we record, right? We binge watch a little bit, we catch up on the DVR, and one of the TV shows I watched 4 or 5 episodes of last week is this show, Alone. Anybody ever seen the show Alone? It's on the History Channel, and it's a survival show, and it's actually a contest. Here's the premise. Thousands of people apply for 10 spots. And if you're chosen, you're allowed to take 10 pieces of survival gear with you, an axe, a sleeping bag. They don't drop you off with nothing. You bring some gear with you. And all 10 participants are placed in a remote location. This year it's Patagonia, South America. And they're all placed about 4 or 5 miles from each other. And they're not allowed to make any contact with each other. They have to stay all by themselves. And at the end of the day, this is a contest. The last person to quit wins $500,000. Now, some of you are thinking, I'm signing up. Like, if they're filming this again, sign me up. You mean all you have to do is live by yourself in the woods for an extended period of time, and you could win $500,000. This is the 3rd season. The first season, the winner went 43 days. Last year, the winner went 66 days. Now, there are 4 or 5 episodes into this show, and I've already noticed that the big challenge for most people isn't being in the woods. It's not making a shelter. It's not even catching food or foraging for wild edibles. The big challenge for most people is being alone. I don't know if you can quite read it. I don't know if I can quite read it. The tagline says, if the elements don't get you, the isolation will. Thousands of people applied for 10 spots. One participant quit after 3 days. He hadn't even gotten hungry yet. He just deeply missed his family. It's hard to be alone, isn't it? And that's the place that Mary and Joseph find themselves in after Jesus is born. They've left Nazareth and gone to Bethlehem, and they're without family and without friends and without a support network. And it's in that moment that God sends a reminder to them that they're not truly alone. Now, last week, Christmas, we gathered, and if you were with us, we talked about the shepherds being invited to see the newborn king. And we talked about the shepherds being invited as a reminder that God's heart is for the forgotten. Right? God could invite anybody to this celebration, and he picks the menial workers working the 3rd shift who probably are a little dirty and stinky from being out in the field. And the people that society doesn't think about, God says, you matter to me. And so for the shepherds and for us, this is a reminder that Jesus is for everybody. But what did it mean to Mary and Joseph to have somebody actually show up after Jesus was born? Do you think that might have been comforting? To know that God had sent somebody to be with them. Luke 2, the angels left them and went back to heaven. The shepherds said to each other, let's go to Bethlehem and see what the Lord has told us about. They went quickly and found Mary and Joseph with the baby who was lying in a manger. And here's this new couple with their first child, and they have nobody to share the joy with. And then these shepherds show up. And there's actually somebody with skin on they can celebrate with. And as I read this passage this year, it occurred to me that it might not have just been the shepherds. It almost sounds like they were gathering a crowd of people as they went from place to place and asked if there happened to be a baby in a manger. Luke continues, when they saw the child, they repeated what they'd been told about him. And what's the next word? Everyone who heard the shepherd's story was amazed. Apparently, the shepherds just didn't share this with Mary and Joseph. They began to tell others. And what if, and I don't know if this is true, but what if other people began to show up too? Can you imagine that for this young couple far from home with no support network, it was comforting to have people to celebrate with? Now, as I was thinking about this week, here's what struck me. God could have sent the angel Gabriel back to them. He's appeared to Mary, he's appeared to Joseph, and angels just appeared to the shepherds. God could have sent an angel to keep them company, but sometimes we need more than angels, don't we? Sometimes the most powerful experience we can have of the presence of God is with another person who's made in the image of God. And so God comforts them that way. The shepherd's visit is not only, I think, a reminder of God's presence and that he's with us and that that's comforting, but it's also a confirmation that God is doing something through them. This is the shepherd's message in Luke chapter 2. When they saw the child, they repeated what they had been told about him. The angel said to them, "Don't be afraid. I have good news for you, a message that will fill everyone with joy. Today, your Savior, Christ the Lord, was born in David's city. This is how you'll recognize him. You'll find an infant wrapped in strips of cloth and lying in a manger." So the shepherds don't just show up and say, "Congratulations." They say, "We know who this child is. This child is the Savior. This child is the King. This child is Emmanuel, God with us." And for Mary and Joseph, who either haven't shared their story with anybody or they haven't found anybody who will believe them yet as to where this baby's come from, don't you think this was confirmation? This next sentence kind of is intriguing to me. Luke 2:19, Mary treasured all these things in her heart and always thought about them. Now, Mary should know better than anybody where this baby has come from, yes? I mean, she had the visit. It's been housed in her body. She knows exactly what has or hasn't happened. And yet, she continues to seem to need confirmation that God has really shown up. And God has really done this. And God has worked in her and through her. And I wonder, as I step into a new year, and as you step into a new year, we might need the same thing. If we not just might need a reminder that God is with us. Maybe you showed up today. You could have worshiped God on your own. You could have read the Bible on your own. You could have played music on your own and sung along. But you showed up because you need the comfort of community and the comfort of a family and the comfort of other people made in God's image. Maybe you needed some other stinky shepherds with you this morning. Or maybe you showed up because you just need confirmation that God is still at work. Maybe you've been through some really hard things in 2016. Lots of us have. Maybe you just need to be reminded that God has not forgotten you. He's still going to show up and do his work in you and through you. Powerful reminder. And it happens for Mary and Joseph through the shepherds. It's not the only reminder they get. They not only get a reminder of God's presence, but they also get a reminder that God is faithful and that he does what he promises to do. He does what he promises to do. Now, in my house, one of the things we did over the Christmas break is we spent a little time on Facebook. Honestly, we don't need Christmas break to do that. We're on Facebook pretty regularly. And one of the crazy things about Facebook is you can stay in touch with people that you haven't seen for decades and that live thousands of miles from you. This week, I got a friend request from a girl I went to third grade with. Now, 20 years ago, I'd have never heard from her again, but now I know where she lives and where she works and that she's married and has kids. It's kind of crazy. And I've noticed this phenomenon on Facebook. Maybe you have too if you're on. It's really easy to pop into somebody's life and then pop back out. It's easy. In fact, my wife and I do this all the time. "Hey, did you know so-and-so got married?" "No, good for them." "Did you know that so-and-so's child who we had in youth ministry just graduated from college?" "Whoa, we're old, right?" "Did you know so-and-so just finalized an adoption?" And it's so easy to pop into a big moment in somebody's life and hit like or love or write congrats and then move on. And they're still living their reality. You've popped in and you've popped out. You don't even have to be on Facebook to do this. On Tuesday, we had some friends come through town and stay with us. They live in Raleigh, North Carolina. Their family's in Chicago, and we happen to be a free place to stay in the middle. So they're good friends of ours. We love to have them. They visited with us in August, and they brought their 2-month-old with them. And, you know, as parents, when you watch new parents, there's something kind of both sacred that's going on, and you're thinking, finally somebody else is dealing with this too, right? Like there's almost a moment of sweet revenge where you're like, yeah, you thought this was easy, and now, you know, you're 2 months in and you know it's not so easy. Well, we saw them in August and they came back, and now their child's 6-month-old. And he's talking and he's sitting up and he's beautiful. And I haven't thought about him at all in between. Saw him at 2 months, saw him at 6 months, but they spent every single day with him. Mary and Joseph have this big moment, and the shepherds come, and yay, and we celebrate, and then the shepherds move on, and they live their lives. But Mary and Joseph are now the proud parents of a 2-week-old, and a 4-week-old, and a 6-week-old, and they're living the reality. And if you've ever been in that spot, that's a tiring reality, isn't it? That's when the story catches back up with Mary and Joseph. In Luke chapter 2, about 6.5 weeks later. We've forgotten about it. They've been living it, and now the stories reunite for a minute. After the days required by Moses' teachings to make a mother clean had passed, Joseph and Mary went to Jerusalem. They took Jesus to present him to the Lord. They did exactly what was written in the Lord's teachings. Every firstborn boy is to be set apart as holy to the Lord. They also offered a sacrifice as required by the Lord's teachings, a pair of mourning doves and 2 young pigeons. So about 40 odd days later, they go to Jerusalem to the temple to dedicate Jesus. They're doing what the law requires. They're doing what their faith would have them do. And as they're there in the temple, a new character enters the story. Someone we've never heard from and don't really hear from afterwards. It's a man named Simeon. A man named Simeon was in Jerusalem. He lived an honorable and devout life. He was waiting for the one who would comfort Israel. The Holy Spirit was with Simeon and had told him that he wouldn't die until he had seen the Messiah whom the Lord would send. Now, have you ever wondered if you'd like to know exactly when you're going to die? If you would like to know the year or the day or the month? I don't know if I would or not, but Simeon knew this. Simeon, you're not going to depart from the planet until you personally lay your eyes on the Messiah. Now, the Jewish people have been waiting for the Messiah for a long time, for generations, for centuries, for quite a while. And yet Simeon has this promise that he personally will see God's salvation before he departs. Moved by the Spirit, Simeon went into the temple courtyard. You can almost see God kind of directing Simeon and Mary and Joseph to each other, can't you? Just kind of scooching them along. Mary and Joseph were bringing the child Jesus into the courtyard at the same time. They brought him so that they could do for him what Moses' teachings required. Then Simeon took the child in his arms and praised God by saying, "Now, Lord, you're allowing your servant to leave in peace as you," what's the next word? Promised. "My eyes have seen your salvation, which you've prepared for all people to see." Okay, don't miss this. Simeon is experiencing 2 important things at the same time. He's experiencing God's faithfulness to all people, to the nations, and he's experiencing God's faithfulness to him personally and individually. He's a light that will reveal salvation to the nations and bring glory to your people, Israel. Now, again, the next sentence is fascinating to me. It says, Jesus' father and mother were what? Amazed at what was said about him. The truth is, they shouldn't be amazed at all. This is what Gabriel told them. This is what the shepherds told them 6 weeks ago. And yet, maybe in a state of sleep deprivation, maybe after changing diaper after diaper after diaper, or maybe just with the glory of God's interaction with them fading a bit, they need to be reminded that God is keeping his promises. I wonder if we need that same reminder too. I wonder if we need to be reminded that God keeps his promises to everyone, to the world, to all people, to the nations, and to us personally. You know, I think one of the hardest places to be is to believe the first but not experience the second. I think it's a hard place to believe that God changes lives but not to have our life changed. I think it's a hard place to be to believe that God heals but not personally to find healing. It's a hard place to believe that God is a comforter but not to feel comforted. And Simeon is a beautiful reminder to Mary and Joseph and to us that God not only shows up for the world, but he'll show up for you. He'll show up for me. There's really no reason for Simeon to be in the Christmas story except God saying, look, you're going to need to remember this. I will keep my promises to you. You're not in control of the timing. Who knows how long Simeon waited, but God was faithful. So I need to remember that God is not only present, but he'll fulfill the promises he's made to us and to me, and to us and to you. One more reminder from the Christmas story after the birth of Jesus is that God provides. God is a provider. Whatever it is we need, he's going to make sure that we have. Now, some of us are celebrating the fact that Christmas is over, but Christmas isn't over for everybody. Did you know that some parts of the Christian family actually celebrate Christmas on January 6th? This is called Epiphany, or, anybody know? Old Christmas, or Three Kings Day. This is a day that we remember that the Magi showed up. And we don't actually know when they showed up. They could have showed up, I guess, on January 6th. They could have showed up to 2 years later. There's a big window of when they might have actually shown up. My brother actually married a lady who's of the Orthodox Christian faith, and so even though we grew up celebrating Christmas on the 25th, now he celebrates on January 6th, and he loves it, because now he has 2 extra weeks to get ready for Christmas. While everybody else is scrambling and wrapping and going to parties, he can just wait. He can wait for the sales on December 26th. In fact, he just contacted me this week. Hey, what do your kids want for Christmas? Oh, yeah, that's still happening, isn't it? Oh, yeah, what do your kids want for Christmas? I was talking to somebody this morning, and they said, as a family growing up, we took our decorations down on January 6th because we celebrated in some way this remembrance. We're remembering that the Magi show up, the wise men. Well, why is it they show up? We first meet them in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea when Herod was king. After Jesus' birth, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is the one who was born to be king of the Jews? We saw his star rising and we've come to worship him." They start looking for the newborn king in the palace, and they're surprised to find that he's not there and that nobody's expecting him. So after a little bit of consultation with the king and his, scholars, they end up leaving, and they get a little bit of GPS celestial, kind of intervention. Matthew 2:9. After they'd heard the king, they started out. The star they'd seen rising led them until it stopped over the place where the child was. They were overwhelmed with joy to see the star. When they entered the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary. So they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chest and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So we last checked in with Mary and Joseph and Jesus when he's 7 days old. And now we're not sure how long it's been. On the high end, it's been 2 years, because Herod later will order the execution of all baby boys 2 years old and younger. We don't know, because he's kind of a maniacal, homicidal, kind of guy, whether that was how old the baby was or whether he's hedging his bets. Maybe the baby's 4 months old, or maybe he's 1.5 years old. We don't know. But it's been a while. And God sends Mary and Joseph another reminder. And this is a confirmation again of his identity, because what do the wise men do? They worship. They present gifts like offerings fit for a king. But I think the actual importance for me this year of their gifts comes with what happens next. This is where we often stop the Christmas. Well, actually, we usually go to the next verse. God warned the wise men in a dream not to go back to Herod, so they left for their country by another road. Now, that's where we like to cut it off, because what happens next is a little dark. And you're not supposed to do dark at Christmas. And yet Jesus actually entered into a spiritual battle, a spiritual war, and at times that's dark. After they'd left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Now, have you noticed that anytime an angel shows up for Joseph, it complicates his life? Right? His plans get set aside, and it's true here. He's done something so far to carve out a life for himself in Bethlehem. They stayed in Bethlehem. He probably found work. He began to make friends. He's established a little bit of solidity for his fledgling family. And then the angel visits again, and everything gets turned upside down. The angel says to him, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt." Now, my kids are at that age where we're watching the Lord of the Rings movies, the Hobbit movies. We watched the Hobbit movies a few months ago, and we watched the first Lord of the Rings movie this week. And my favorite moment in that movie is, if you happen to be nerdy like I am, if not, just disregard. You can disregard for a minute. They're in the mines of Moria, and they're trekking into this big demon thing, fiery demon thing chasing them, and Gandalf gets snared, and he says 3 words that are so powerful. "Run, you fools. Run." Right? This is what the angel says. Run. Somebody's coming to kill your child. So Joseph gets up, actually says, "Stay in Egypt, go to Egypt and stay there until I tell you, because Herod intends to search for the child and not bow down to him, not coronate him, not welcome him into the royal family, kill him." Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and left for Egypt that night. Now, how do you think this young family, who probably didn't have great means, got by in a strange land as refugees for a couple years? I mean, how would they have been able to afford a place to live when they don't have any family, no job? How would they have afforded food? How would they have, if they had to bribe, I don't know if they had to bribe anybody to get what they needed. God had already provided ahead of time what they would need, didn't he? Can you imagine when the wise men open up these chests, they're thinking, what in the world will we need? Gold and frankincense, and what are we going to do? We're the average people. What are we going to do with that stuff? Well, God knew ahead of time what they would need, didn't he? And maybe it's bit by bit they barter, and it's bit by bit they trade, and we're not quite sure exactly how long they're in Egypt, but it seems to be years. And before they even understood what it was for, God has provided for them. I wonder what God has provided for you already that you don't know why. I wonder what experience you've gone through and you thought you just survived it, but God is actually preparing you to do something with that experience later. I wonder what relationships you've built, and you think these are just casual friendships or people you know a little bit, but God's actually preparing to do something. I wonder what kind of gifts you've been given. Maybe they're even sitting dormant. And you thought, yeah, this is just something I can do. I'm just able to do this. And God said, no, I'm preparing you ahead of time. God provides, doesn't he? For the birds of the air, flowers in the field, for a family that's about to run for their lives, and for us. So, I wonder what moment you hope you'll remember from this Christmas. I wonder if there was a big gift you gave. I wonder if you surprised somebody with something. I wonder if there was a surprise visitor who came to you. You thought there's no way they were going to show up, but they actually, booked a flight and spent the money. And you think, man, I just want to hold on to that memory. And the truth is, I hope you do, and I hope I do too. And yet, at times, we need reminders. And so after Jesus arrives, God sends people into the lives of Mary and Joseph so that they'll remember that he's present, that he's with them, that he's at work in them and through them, that he's going to keep his promises, even if we start to wonder and doubt, and that he's going to provide even when we're not sure what that would look like or how in the world it could happen. And I think what I'm most curious about for me and for you this morning is which of these reminders you most need to take with you into a new year. Mary and Joseph were leaving the season of pregnancy and birth into a new season of being a family and raising a baby. We're stepping out of one year into another. In one sense, it's one more day on the calendar, but in another sense, we acknowledge there's a big blank slate in front of us. And based on what you've gone through in 2016, and based on who knows what's ahead of us in 2017, maybe, like me, you need to remember that God's present. Maybe there are people in your lives that actually manifest the presence of God because they're people made in his image and they bring the Spirit with them into your life. Maybe you need to remember that he keeps his promises because he's made promises to you. Maybe directly, maybe through the scripture, I don't know. But it doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. Or you just wonder what's going to happen. Maybe you desperately need God to provide. Maybe you'd love for the Magi to show up and bring some gold. I don't know if I need the frankincense and myrrh, but the gold would be okay, right? Maybe you just need to remember that he's gotten you this far, and even though things seem uncertain, and even though things are shifting, and even though those tests haven't come back yet, he's going to provide. Well, let me invite the band up. We have one more song to offer, and as they're settling in, let me just encourage myself, and I'll encourage you to do this. Would you think and pray, if you're a journaler, you can journal, or even have conversations as a family about which of those reminders you need most as you step into the new year? Maybe those conversations will even turn into prayers. And maybe God will even answer those prayers by sending people like shepherds or Simeon or the Magi to you. For now, we're going to sing one final song that encourages us to fix our hearts